Admiral Ha-1 stood at the main window of her command ship, the Star Splendor, her eyes fixed on the strange vessel floating in the distance. In her 30 years of service to the Galactic Confederation, she had never seen anything like it. "What am I looking at, Ji-ho?" she asked her second-in-command. Ji-ho checked his datapad again. "It appears to be a human cargo ship, Admiral. They call it the Thunderchild." Ha-1 could not hide her surprise. The ship before her looked nothing like a proper space vessel should. While Confederation ships were perfect crystals of light and beauty, this human ship was ugly. It had weird bumps all over its hull. Random pieces stuck out at odd angles. Parts of it didn't even match in color. "Are we sure it's not broken?" she asked. "No, Admiral. According to our scans, everything is working as intended." Ji-ho showed her the readings. "They designed it this way on purpose." Ha-1 shook her head. "Impossible. No proper spacefaring race would build ships like this. Look at those solar panels. They're not even symmetrical." As if hearing her criticism, the human ship suddenly began to move. Its engines came to life with a strange blue glow. The light pulsed in an uneven rhythm that made Ha-1's eyes hurt. "Track them," she ordered. "I want to see how this heap of metal actually performs." The Star Splendor's advanced tracking systems activated, locking onto the human vessel. But something strange happened. The tracking beams seemed to slip off the Thunderchild's odd surface, unable to get a proper lock. "What's going on?" Ha-1 demanded. "It's those random protrusions, Admiral," Ji-ho said, studying his screens. "They're breaking up our tracking signals. And those asymmetrical panels. They're creating unusual energy patterns our systems can't predict." Ha-1 watched in growing amazement as the ugly human ship performed a series of maneuvers that should have been impossible for a cargo vessel. It spun and twisted, using its weird shape to slip through space in ways that defied conventional navigation. "Open a channel," she ordered. "I want to speak to their captain." The main screen lit up, showing a human woman in a simple uniform. Her name tag read Captain Haenul. "Greetings, Admiral," Haenul said with a small bow. "How can we help the Confederation today?" "Captain, your ship." Ha-1 paused, trying to find diplomatic words. "Your ship's design is most unusual." Haenul smiled. "Oh, the Thunderchild. She's not much to look at, but she gets the job done. We find that perfect shapes aren't always the most practical in real space conditions. But the efficiency loss must be enormous," Ha-1 argued. "Those irregular surfaces create drag and waste energy." "Actually," Haenul replied, "those irregular surfaces help us ride solar winds and navigate gravitational fields. We found that space isn't perfectly ordered. Sometimes a little chaos works better than perfect symmetry." Before Ha-1 could respond, her ship's alarms began blaring. A solar flare had just erupted from a nearby star, sending dangerous radiation toward both vessels. "Evasive action," Ha-1 ordered, but as her beautiful crystalline ship struggled to turn around, she watched in disbelief as the Thunderchild simply tilted its odd angles toward the incoming radiation. The solar energy seemed to flow around its strange shape, barely affecting it at all. "Fascinating," Ji-ho whispered, recording everything. "They're not fighting against space phenomena. They're working with them." Ha-1 couldn't take her eyes off the ugly human ship. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to human engineering than met the eye. She had a feeling this wouldn't be her last encounter with these strangely designed vessels. "Captain Haenul," she said, "I believe we have much to learn from each other." The human captain smiled again. "We'd be happy to share our knowledge, Admiral. After all, in space, practical usually beats pretty." As the Thunderchild prepared to continue its journey, Ha-1 turned to Ji-ho. "Send all our data on that ship to engineering. I want a full analysis. These humans might be onto something with their stupid-looking ships." Ji-ho nodded, already drafting the report. Sometimes, he thought, The greatest discoveries came from the most unexpected places, even from ships that looked like they were built from spare parts and crazy ideas. Engineer Du Young stood before the Confederation Council, trying to hide his excitement. The large screen behind him showed detailed images of human ships, each one stranger than the last. The council members looked at the pictures with mixed expressions of confusion and disgust. Honorable council members, Du Young began, what you see here are not failed experiments or damaged vessels. These are working human ships, designed and built this way on purpose. Council leader Ta Wan leaned forward in his crystal chair. Engineer, are you suggesting we should take these primitive designs seriously? Yes, sir, I am. Du Young touched his control pad, and a new image appeared. It showed the Thunder Child avoiding the solar flare. Our ships must turn away from solar flares. Their ships can continue straight through them. But look at them. Council member Sunhai pointed at the screen. They have pieces sticking out everywhere. Some parts don't even match. How can this be better than our perfect designs? Du Young smiled and pressed another button. A simulation began playing, showing how solar winds and radiation interacted with both human and Confederation ships. Watch closely, he said. Our beautiful ships try to deflect everything. But these strange human shapes actually work with space itself. Those odd angles, they create unexpected energy patterns. Those mismatched parts, each one serves a specific purpose. He showed them more data. Graphs and charts filled the screen, comparing ship performance in different conditions. The council members started whispering among themselves as they saw the results. This data can't be right, Ta Wan said. You're telling us that in some situations, these ugly human ships work better than ours. Exactly. Du Young brought up a new image. Look at this human mining vessel. We thought those bumps on its hull were repair patches. They're actually sensitive spots that can feel changes in gravity and radiation. The ship uses them to find valuable minerals. Sunhai stood up, her formal robes shimmering. But our ships are perfect. We've spent centuries making them this way. Perfect for calm space, yes. Du Young agreed. But space isn't always calm. Humans design their ships for the real conditions out there. They don't try to make space follow their rules. Instead, they adapt to what space gives them. He showed them one final simulation. It displayed a human ship using a star's gravity to make a tight turn, something Confederation ships couldn't do. Their ships look stupid because we're looking at them wrong, Du Young explained. We see ugly shapes and random parts. But there's a pattern in their chaos. Each weird angle, every strange bump. They all work together in ways we never thought possible. The council members watched in silence as more performance data scrolled across the screen. Du Young could see them thinking, considering what this meant for the Confederation. What are you suggesting, engineer? Ta Wan finally asked. I request permission to work with human engineers, Du Young said, not to copy their designs, but to understand their thinking. Maybe there's a way to combine our beautiful ships with their practical ideas. Sunhai shook her head. The public won't like this. Our ships represent everything the Confederation stands for: order, beauty, perfection. But what if we could make them better? Du Young asked. What if we could keep their beauty while adding human innovation? The council talked quietly among themselves. Du Young waited, hoping they would see past their prejudices. Finally, Ta Wan spoke. You have 1 month, Engineer Du Young. Work with the humans. Study their strange ships. But remember, we are the Confederation. Whatever you learn must not compromise who we are. Du Young bowed deeply. Thank you, Council. I promise you won't regret this. As he gathered his data pads to leave, Du Young smiled to himself. The Council didn't realize it yet, but they had just taken the first step toward a new era of space travel. Sometimes the stupidest-looking ideas turned out to be the smartest ones of all. He couldn't wait to start working with the human engineers. They had so much to teach each other. And maybe, just maybe, they could create something entirely new, Ships that were both beautiful and practical, perfect and strange, ordered and chaos working together in harmony. The diplomatic meeting was not going well. Captain Hay-Newell sat at one end of the conference table aboard the Confederation station, trying to stay calm. Across from her, 3 Confederation trade representatives looked at her with doubt in their eyes. "Your shipping rates are too high," said Representative Daho. "No one will pay that much for cargo transport." Hay-Newell touched the control panel in front of her. A map of local space appeared above the table. "The rates are high because we go where other ships can't. Look at this route through the asteroid field. We can save 2 weeks of travel time." "Impossible," said Representative Yi Jin. "No ship can safely navigate the dark stone asteroid field. The gravitational forces are too unpredictable." Just then, the station's alarms began to sound. A voice came over the speakers. "Warning. Asteroid storm approaching. All ships must move to safe positions immediately." Everyone rushed to the observation window. Outside, they could see ships scrambling to escape the incoming storm. Beautiful Confederation vessels moved away in perfect formation, their crystal hulls gleaming. The Thunder Child, however, didn't move. Captain Hay-Newell called Daho. "Your ship must leave now." Hay-Newell smiled. "Actually, this is the perfect chance to show you what our ugly ships can do. Thunderchild, begin demonstration sequence." Through the window, they watched as the human ship turned to face the asteroid storm. Its strange shape, which had looked so wrong to Confederation eyes, now seemed to come alive. The first asteroids arrived. The Thunderchild didn't try to avoid them. Instead, it moved between them in a crazy dance. Those odd bumps on its hull sensed the gravitational fields from each space rock. The asymmetrical panels caught the energy and used it to power the ship's movements. "What is this?" whispered Yi Jin, pressing against the window to watch. "This is why our ships look the way they do," Hay-Newell explained. "Each weird part has a purpose. See those long arms that everyone thinks are repair mistakes? They're gravity sensors. The uneven hull shape, it lets us spin with the asteroid fields instead of fighting against them." They watched in amazement as the Thunderchild wound its way through the storm. While other ships had to hide, the human vessel almost seemed to be playing with the asteroids. It used their gravity to save fuel, letting their natural movement guide its path. Computer, called Representative Daho, analyzed the human ship's power usage. The station's AI responded. "Thunderchild is operating at 23% power capacity. Ship is using gravitational assistance for 77% of its propulsion needs." The representatives looked at their data pads, then at each other. The numbers were clear. The human ship was doing the impossible, and doing it while barely using any power. "Now you understand our rates," Hay-Newell said quietly. "We don't avoid dangerous routes. We work with them. Those 2 weeks of saved travel time. That's because our stupid ships can go places your perfect ships can't." The storm began to clear. The Thunderchild made one final spin around a large asteroid and returned to its docking position. Not a single scratch marked its strange hull. Representative Yi Jin cleared her throat. "Captain Hay-Newell, perhaps we should discuss those shipping contracts again." "Of course," Hay-Newell agreed. "But first, would you like to come aboard? I can show you how our gravity sensors work. Maybe you'll understand why we build our ships this way." As they walked to the Thunderchild's docking port, Hay-Newell heard the representatives whispering among themselves. They still thought her ship was ugly, but now they understood. In space, survival wasn't about looking good. It was about working with the chaos, not against it. And if that meant building ships that looked stupid to others, well, that was just fine with humans. Engineer Du Young sat in his lab, surrounded by models of human ships. Each one looked stranger than the last. Beside him, human engineer Sang Mei worked on a computer model, her fingers moving quickly over the controls. "There," she said, pointing to the screen. "Watch what happens when we add an uneven surface here." Du Young leaned forward. The simulation showed energy flows around a ship's hull. When they changed the surface from smooth to bumpy, something amazing happened. The energy didn't bounce off anymore. It flowed around the ship like water. "I don't understand," Du Young said. "Everything we know says ships should be smooth and perfect." Sang Mi smiled. "That's because you're thinking about space wrong. Space isn't smooth and perfect. It's full of waves and ripples. Our ships are built to ride those waves." She pulled up another model. This one showed the Thunder Child's design broken down into parts. "See these weird bumps? They're like the fins on an earth fish. They help us feel and move with the currents of space." Do Young walked to his shelf and picked up a model of a Confederation ship. Its crystal shape caught the light beautifully. "Our ships try to cut through space," he said slowly. "Your ships try to swim in it." "Exactly." Sang Mi clapped her hands. "Space is like an ocean. You can fight against the waves, or you can learn to surf them." They spent hours testing different designs. Each time they added what looked like a flaw, the ship's performance got better. Uneven panels caught solar energy more efficiently. Random protrusions created unexpected energy fields that helped with movement. "But why do the parts have to be different colors?" Du Young asked, looking at another model. "They don't have to be," Sang Mi explained. "We use different materials for different jobs. Each material has its own color. We could paint them all the same. But why waste time making things look pretty when they work fine as they are?" Du Young thought about all the time his people spent making their ships beautiful. How much energy did they waste just to keep everything perfectly matched? Just then, his computer beeped. New test results were ready. Du Young looked at the numbers and sat down hard in his chair. "This can't be right," he whispered. Sang Mi looked over his shoulder. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. That's just it." He showed her the screen. "These efficiency ratings, they're higher than anything we've ever achieved. And we're using half the power our ships normally need." They looked at the design they had created together. It wasn't as ugly as a human ship, but it wasn't as perfect as a Confederation vessel either. It had odd angles and uneven surfaces. Parts stuck out where they shouldn't. But the numbers didn't lie. It was better than anything either of them had made before. "We did it," Sang Mi said softly. "We made something new." Do Young nodded. "Not perfect. Not ugly. Just right." He started preparing his report for the council. They wouldn't like how the new ship looked, but when they saw how it performed, they would have to listen. "You know what's funny?" Sang Mi said as they saved their work. "Humans didn't start building ugly ships because we wanted to. We did it because we had to. We couldn't make ships as beautiful as yours, so we focused on making them work better instead." Do Young looked at their creation again. "Maybe that's why you succeeded. You weren't trying to be perfect. You were just trying to survive." "And now?" Sang Mi asked. "Now we can do both," Du Young said. "Not perfect. Not ugly. Something in between. Something better." As they finished their work that day, both engineers knew they had started something important. The age of perfect crystal ships was ending. The age of practical beauty was about to begin. The emergency alarms rang through every ship and station in the Centauri system. A massive solar storm was approaching, bigger than any seen before. 3 million people lived in the system's colonies, and they were all in danger. Admiral Hawan stood on her command bridge, watching the deadly storm approach on her screens. Her beautiful fleet of Confederation ships couldn't get close enough to help. The radiation would destroy their perfect crystal hulls. "Admiral," called her communications officer, "Captain Haynul is requesting permission to attempt a rescue mission." Hawan turned to her main screen. The human captain appeared, looking calm despite the crisis. Behind her, the Thunder Child's strange bridge buzzed with activity. "What are you planning, Captain?" Hawan asked. "Our ships can handle the radiation," Haynul explained. "Those ugly designs you hate so much, they're perfect for this kind of storm. We can create safe corridors for evacuation ships. HFY looked at her data screens. The storm was getting worse. They were running out of time. How many human ships do we have in the system? 20 cargo ships and 15 mining vessels, HFY replied. Not pretty, but they'll get the job done. HFY made her decision. You have command of the rescue mission, Captain. Tell us what you need. HFY's plan was as unusual as her ships. The human vessels would form a line through the storm, using their weird shapes to channel the solar energy around them. This would create a safe path for evacuation ships to follow. It's like creating a tunnel through the storm, HFY explained to the other captains. Our ship's strange designs will actually help us here. The more uneven our formation, the better it will work. The human ships moved into position. From HFY's command ship, they looked like a line of broken toys against the bright fury of the solar storm. But as she watched, something amazing happened. The strange bumps and angles of the human ships began to glow. They weren't fighting the storm, they were working with it. Solar energy flowed around their uneven hulls in beautiful patterns. Between the ships, clear spaces appeared where the radiation couldn't reach. First evacuation ships, you are clear to proceed, HFY called. Follow our energy wake. Don't try to fly straight. Move like we move. Hours passed. The human ships danced through the storm, adjusting their positions constantly. When one ship's systems got too hot, another would move to take its place. Their seemingly random designs allowed them to handle the solar energy in ways no Confederation ship could match. From her command post, HFY watched in amazement. The rescue ships followed the twisting path created by the human vessels. It looked chaotic, but it worked perfectly. Ship after ship made it through to safety. Admiral, her sensor officer reported, 90% of the colonists have been evacuated. The human ships are holding position despite increasing radiation levels. HFY opened a channel to all ships. Captain HFY, your ships have saved millions of lives today. I apologize for ever doubting their design. HFY's tired face appeared on the screen. The Thunderchild's bridge was dark except for the glow of emergency lights. Thank you, Admiral. But we're not done yet. There are still people out there who need our help. The human ships stayed in the storm until every last colonist was safe. Their hulls were scorched, their paint burned away, making them look even uglier than before. But they had done what the Confederation's beautiful ships could not. When it was over, HFY wrote in her official report, "Today I learned that true beauty in spaceflight isn't about looking perfect. It's about saving lives. And sometimes, the ugliest ships can do the most beautiful things." Admiral HFY stood before the Confederation Council, her formal uniform still showing scorch marks from the solar storm rescue. Behind her, a large screen displayed images of the human ships forming their rescue corridor. "Honorable Council members," she began, "I am here to present evidence that will change how we think about space travel forever." The council chamber was fuller than usual. News of the rescue mission had spread quickly. Even those who hated human ship designs wanted to understand how they had saved 3 million lives. First, let me show you what happened when our ships tried to approach the storm. HFY played a recording. The council watched as beautiful Confederation ships turned back, their crystal hulls unable to handle the radiation. Now, watch the human ships. The screen showed the Thunderchild and other human vessels moving into the storm. Their strange shapes caught the light in odd ways. "You see what looks like chaos," HFY said, "but there is a pattern here. Each bump, each random angle, serves a purpose." She touched her control pad. New images appeared, showing how the solar energy flowed around the human ships. They don't try to defeat the storm, they work with it. Those ugly shapes we laughed at. They create paths through the energy that other ships can follow. Council leader HFY leaned forward. "But our ships are based on centuries of perfect design. Are you suggesting we abandon this?" "No," HFY replied. "I'm suggesting we learn from it. Engineer Du Young, Do Young stepped forward from the side of the room. He carried a model of a new ship design. This is what happens when we combine our knowledge with human innovation. He placed the model on the council table. It wasn't as perfect as a Confederation ship, but it wasn't as chaotic as a human vessel either. It had a crystal core with carefully planned irregular surfaces. Different materials created patterns that looked almost artistic. We kept the strength of our crystal hulls, Du Young explained, but we added features that let the ship work with space instead of against it. It's beautiful and practical at the same time. The council members studied the model. Some frowned at its unusual shape, but others looked interested. We have test results, HFY continued. She displayed new data on the screen. This hybrid design performs 40% better than our current ships. It uses less power, survives stronger storms, and can go places we never could before. She showed them more footage from the rescue mission. Human ships save millions of lives because they were built for reality, not perfection. Space is not a perfect place. Maybe our ships shouldn't be perfect either. Council member Sunhai stood up. Admiral, are you saying we should make our ships ugly? No, HFY smiled. I'm saying we should make them better. Different isn't always wrong. Sometimes the strangest ideas are the best ones. She played one final recording. It showed the human ships in the heart of the solar storm, their weird shapes glowing as they channeled the energy around them. In that moment, they didn't look ugly at all. They looked like they belonged there, part of space itself. The choice is yours, HFY told the council. We can keep making perfect ships that fail when we need them most, or we can learn from those who found a different way. The humans didn't build ugly ships because they wanted to. They built them because they worked. The council chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then Tae-won spoke. Admiral HFY, Engineer Du Young, you have given us much to think about. Perhaps it is time for the Confederation to consider a new definition of perfect. As the council began their discussions, HFY looked at the hybrid ship model again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't ugly. It was something new, something that could change everything. Sometimes the best ideas came from the strangest places, even from ships that looked like they were built backward. Lead designers Yoon Seo and Min Ho stood in the massive shipyard, watching workers attach crystal panels to an unusual frame. This was the first full-size hybrid ship, combining Confederation beauty with human practicality. Neither designer felt completely happy with how it looked. The crystal sections aren't perfectly aligned, Yoon Seo said, checking her plans again. They need to be slightly off-center to create the right energy patterns. Min Ho nodded, making notes on his datapad. And the outer hull has to be rough in some places. The sensors work better when the surface isn't smooth. A group of traditional shipbuilders walked past, shaking their heads at the strange vessel. One of them called out, "You're ruining decades of perfect design." Yoon Seo wanted to argue, but Min Ho touched her arm. Let them think what they want. The test results will speak for themselves. They walked through the shipyard, checking on different parts of the construction. Human and Confederation workers worked side by side, learning from each other. It wasn't always easy. The two groups had very different ideas about how things should be done. The human workers keep adding extra support beams, a Confederation engineer complained. They're ruining the crystal's natural strength. Those supports saved my ship 3 times, a human worker replied. Beauty doesn't matter when you're floating in space with a cracked hull. Yoon Seo stepped between them. Both ways have value. That's why we're combining them. The crystal is strong, but the supports make it safer. We want ships that are both beautiful and practical. The work continued day after day. Slowly, the hybrid ship took shape. It had the core beauty of a Confederation vessel, but also the practical features of human design. The crystal hull sparkled in the light, while strange bumps and angles broke up its perfect surface. One morning, an important message arrived. The Confederation Council wanted to see the ship in action. They would attend the first test flight. Are we ready? Minho asked, looking worried. We have to be, Yun-seo replied. This is our chance to prove that different ideas can work together. On test day, the shipyard was full of people. Council members stood on viewing platforms, watching as the hybrid ship prepared for launch. Many of them frowned at its unusual appearance. The ship's engines started. They didn't hum in the perfect tone of a Confederation ship. Instead, they made a strange but strong sound, mixing crystal technology with human engineering. Begin test sequence, Yun-seo ordered. The hybrid ship rose smoothly from its dock. Its crystal sections caught the light beautifully, while its practical features began collecting data about space conditions. It looked different from anything ever built before, but it moved with grace and power. First test, Minho called. Radiation resistance. Strong radiation beams hit the ship. The crystal sections would normally need protection, but the human-designed outer layer guided the energy safely away. The ship didn't just survive. It used the radiation to power some of its systems, just like human vessels did. More tests followed. The hybrid ship passed each one, performing better than either human or Confederation ships could alone. It was strong, efficient, and adaptive. Not perfect, not ugly, but something new and better. When the tests finished, even the council members looked impressed. One of them approached the designers. It's very different, she said carefully, but the results are clear. How soon can we begin upgrading the fleet? Yun-seo and Minho looked at each other and smiled. Their strange new ship had done more than pass its tests. It had shown everyone that sometimes the best path forward meant leaving old ideas of perfect behind. We'll need to train crews in the new systems, Minho said, both human and Confederation engineers working together. Good, the council member replied. It's time we learned from each other. As the sun set over the shipyard, the hybrid ship stood as a symbol of change. It proved that the stupidest-looking ideas could lead to the smartest solutions, if people were brave enough to try them.